Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale Spider-Man No Way Home figure unboxing and review. Today, we're taking a look at Tobey Maguire as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research. Make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site in the description below, along with the discount code Justin's Collection, for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys figure review goes live on the channel. As for the box art, it's been a while since a box has been large enough to almost take up my entire review space. This thing is bloody massive. We've got an image of Tobey off to one side, web swinging through a Doctor Strange portal, and he's being chased by the villains. We've got some Doc Ock tentacles, some pumpkin bombs, and some electricity for Electro. Then up in the top left-hand corner, we have another image of Tobey. This time it's from the film, but for some weird reason, they decided to slap the special edition sticker right in the middle of his face. Surely there was a better spot for it, like maybe even in the top right-hand corner instead of the left, for example. Now, all of the artwork is done in high gloss, whereas the background, this smoky blue area down below, is done in a matte textured finish. Then over the top of that, Spider-Man No Way Home and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Deluxe version. And then on the side of the box, a couple of images from the film. We have the three Spideys landing on top of the Statue of Liberty's head, and Integrated Suit Spidey being stopped by Tobey whilst trying to impale Green Goblin with his own glider. Doing the artwork in red like this, in high gloss as well with the TV scan lines over the top, does help it contrast against this almost smoky effect for the navy blue parts, done in a matte textured finish, with the glossy raised techie web patterns on the surface. Around the back, it is pretty boring. It's literally just warnings and legal information and a touch of lightning to represent Electro. They have, however, still added more of that glossy web techie pattern stuff just here and there. Thank goodness for the magic of snap transitions, because trying to wrangle this box on camera would have literally been impossible. I promise, I'm not over-exaggerating about the size of this box. When you get yours in hand, if you also go for the deluxe version, oh, you will see what I mean. Right, so as expected, the culprit for the size of the box, it's the Sandman diorama-style display base. Underneath the slipcover, an open window showcasing Tobey, who only takes up a little sliver of space just off to the side there, his accessories, and that Sandman diorama base. So this is a little bit awkward, but Hot Toys have been making some very goofy mistakes recently, and this is just another one to add to the list. Instead of printing Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on the back of the box, they've printed Integrated Suit. And no, I haven't randomly switched the box on you. This is a genuine mistake. Probably going forward they'll fix it. I just don't know how this sort of stuff happens. The artwork though, I love. I never get tired of seeing the cracked multiverse with the splotches representing the villains trying to break through. And of course the spider logo in the style of a Doctor Strange spell. I just quickly checked again, and everywhere else on the box it doesn't say Integrated Suit. It's just around the back underneath the slipcover. I wouldn't be surprised if the dude who was doing the photoshopping for the box just reused the assets from the Integrated Suit, and that's why it says that. They forgot to change the wording. So keep an eye out on future batches. Like I said, it's probably going to be fixed. I mean, it better be, because details are important, especially the name of the character that's coming in the box. You want the name to be right all the way around, not just on 90% of the packaging. First in-hand impressions. So far so good. This does feel like an upgrade compared to the previous version of Sam Raimi's suit Spidey from Hot Toys. What we are going to do now though, is get all of his accessories laid out in the lightbox and take a closer look at everything he comes with. Starting off with the diorama style display base first. You'll have to bear with me because this thing is gigantic, as you can see compared to the size of my hand. Now you do get these little sign pieces that are really well painted and textured, but they don't necessarily have a defined spot to go. They just sort of sit there. You can put them wherever you want them to be, and you do get 2 of these in total. So I suppose it's time to try and wrangle this thing on camera, which is not going to be easy considering how sizable and heavy it is. Off to one side, we have Sandman's face. You can see the frown lines, the eyes, his big nose, and even some sculpted teeth. Whereas on the other side, we've got Sandman's hand. Some of my favourite details on this base are the chunks of rubble with the lighter dry brushing over the top, and the bits where it looks like the sand is falling off him and piling on the ground. Now, the head can rotate. You can move it out a little, so it looks like he's facing his hand a touch more, but then it makes the display base significantly wider thanks to this chunk of rebar, which is also well sculpted and painted. In the middle, we have this lattice work made to look like rusty metal, it's also broken, and a Doc Ock tentacle. You can actuate the little pincers if you want, but it doesn't close fully like it's supposed to. And the tentacle itself is made of this rubbery material with that speckling of dirt and grime and the metallic finish to it. So it's not identical to the actual Doc Ock tentacles. Those were all ball joints. So it's not as realistic as what we saw on the figure himself. The head part is hollow. You can see it looks like this swirling tornado of sand forming its alcove. And the flight pole screws in behind that with the spring-loaded waist clamp. The best part about that is if you remove the flight pole because it is tucked behind his face, you aren't going to see the port that it screws into. It is nice and hidden. So all of that, that's the good stuff. Unfortunately, there is one freaking huge negative. It's the paint applications, or the paint/finishing process. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but there's shading, there's lighter dry brushing, all of that is great. What isn't is that it's covered in real sand, and in theory that's awesome because you can't get any more realistic for a Sandman diorama style display base than having real sand on it. It feels genuine. But the byproduct of that is it's going everywhere. It's all over my review space, it's all over my hands, and it's all over the inside of the base itself. So I'm worried that it's going to stick to Tobey, it's quite coarse, so maybe do damage to the suit, and get everywhere in the display. Am I overreacting with the sand thing? Just let me know down in the comment section below. Maybe you like the idea of having some sand sprinkled around in the cabinet. That could potentially add to the realism of having Sandman in there. Now, when you remove the Doc Ock tentacle, this little piece does plug in around the back and covers up the hole. Not entirely necessary because it is around the back. Still, I'd much rather have a cap cover piece like this to hide the port than not, so keeping it seamless is always a good option. Overall, it's a beautiful looking base, and it feels great with that real sand texture. It's just that one drawback that's stopping me from wanting to go all out and finding a spot for this in my Spider-Man No Way Home collection. Tried my best to clean up most of the sand grains down below. If you do see some lingering sand down there, then that just hammers my point home as to why I don't think real sand was the right call. Now, you do get this Tobey Maguire head sculpt, and it's got a skin tone neck, plus a fabric part for the collar of the suit. I am curious to see how this blends when we pop it on the body, and that's when we'll go into way more detail on the sculpt itself. To go along with the unmasked head sculpt, we get a separate mask, also made of fabric, with these lenses glued onto the surface. They do have a decent amount of depth to them, you can see the mesh understructure, then the glossy overlay, which does make them look like real lenses. And before you ask, no, he can't wear this mask on that head sculpt. It just doesn't stretch enough to do that, and it would look goofy as hell. This is more so meant to be held than worn. We do get the Sandman Cure, which is essentially a miniaturized version of a particle accelerator. It spins around, it shoots something out and turns Sandman from Sand Dude into a normal dude. It looks very homemade, and that's because it is. It was made by 3 dudes in the Midtown Science Lab. You've got some wires sticking out, some electrical tape that is actually bumpy over the top of the wires. That's some very good sculpt work. And these prongs up the top. Do be careful, they feel a little bit fragile because those connectors are super teeny tiny. When it comes to webs, he just missed out on the new ones, the new array that we got with the Advanced Suit 2.0 and Miles from the PS5 Spider-Man 2 game. These are the old school ones. We get the spooled up web, we've got the funnel web attachment that you can plug onto the end of some of these, and the smaller ones with the rounded tips for web thwipping poses. And lastly, a full array of hands, ranging from the Spidey meme pointing gesture hands, 2 wall-crawling hands, semi-relaxed-ish open palm hands, a half-grip hand for the right side, then a web-swinging hand for the left, which does just look like a closed fist with a hole drilled through the top, actual closed fists already installed on him out of the box, and some web-whipping hands. They all have the raised web lines painted in this shiny metallic gunmetal silver. And then for the red parts, they have this subtle red brick pattern, which is accurate, and I'm hoping will help the hands blend in with the suit. If you're wondering how you attach the webs to the thwipping hands, it's quite straightforward. You switch out the palm piece, then you can plug your desired web into the spooled up clear plastic attachment. Blending in the seam with the web lines was very clever, because as you can see, the web whipping hands without the spooled up piece on there don't even really look like they're segmented. What we are going to do now, though, is get Tobey himself out here. Standing straight up and down in the lightbox, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. There are certain choices on this guy that just have me sitting here scratching my head thinking what were Hot Toys thinking, such as the blue material choice, potentially the skinniness of the body, the seams on the head sculpt, and of course the lenses. I do want to tear into it, but at the same time, I can't, because I love it. I know people hate when I say this, and it's a cop-out. This is the best 1/6 scale mass-produced Tobey. I'm not counting customs, because people can go crazy and get this to look even more accurate, and maybe even do a full custom suit. Out of all the third-party offerings, out of all of the previous Hot Toys offerings, I think that, truthfully, even though we're early on in the video, he looks super realistic standing there, there's a ton of detail on the suit. I'm just gonna say it. This is my new favourite 1/6 scale Tobey. Up close and personal, kicking things off with Spidey's masked head sculpt. We will look at the Tobey Maguire one in just a second. Now the overall shape is a little bit too round for me. I know that in No Way Home it did sort of look like this, but we all know that in the Raimi trilogy he had this very chiseled looking face shell with almost a square jaw down the bottom. I would have liked to have seen that versus this more rounder look they went with. Now, the head sculpt is covered in fabric, and unfortunately, that means that there are seams. There's a massive one up the top, there's one underneath his chin, and there's one around the base of the neck. I think they should have gone sculpted. You can still do this separate neck thing if you want to have that exposed skin tone neck with the Tobey head sculpt, but there's no reason why there can't be a seam under his jawline. It would have made the head sculpt look even more chiseled. They could have gone sculpted, ditched the seams, and I think it would have looked just as good as this, if not even better. The web lines are raised on the surface, they are metallic, and they do meet in the middle around the front. But the position where they meet isn't right. This is supposed to be significantly higher between the points on his lenses. See what I mean? The box art got it right. That's where the web lines are supposed to meet, between the lenses. The figure has it meeting on his nose, which just accentuates how pointy the nose is. And then the lenses themselves are the wrong shape and size, and they're on the wrong angle too. That's not to say they aren't well detailed, they still look good. We've got this silver mesh understructure, then a clear plastic layer over the top, which does add a lot of depth. So the seams, all three of them, the web lines being inaccurate and the lenses being wrong, all of that stuff does add up. Not enough to ruin the figure for me, but enough to hope that a third-party company will give us a proper, accurate, upgraded head sculpt in the future. All of that stuff with the mask, that just helps make my decision to go unmasked for Tobey so much easier. And that's not a bad thing, especially when the head sculpt is this good. It's not quite as perfect as the prototype, granted, that was a 10 out of 10. Whereas this one, for me, is more of an 8.5 to a 9. It's close, but there still has been a drop between the final product and the prototype. The likeness, I think, is there. It looks like an older Tobey Maguire, all the way down to the slightly skinnier skin tone neck. They've even gone so far as to add some wrinkles underneath his chin, which you'd normally not actually see, unless of course you're tilting the head sculpt upwards. He's got this 5 o'clock shadow with these individual sculpted strands of hair over the top, and this feathered hairline which does perfectly blend in with the rest of the sculpt. And there's skin texture absolutely everywhere, that soft speckling on the surface to mimic natural complexion. There's also this almost soft intensity to the expression. There's a very subtle furrowed brow, which from certain angles does make him look very serious. The only thing I would have liked to have seen added here would have been moving eyes. Unfortunately, Tobey was announced at a bit of a weird time in the line. Hot Toys were trying to work out whether or not they should go all in with moving eyes, and now of course they have. But when this guy was announced, they hadn't made that decision, so he missed out, whereas Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, he got the moving eyes, and it does make a massive difference. Oh, and this seam down the bottom for the neck, it is just as noticeable on the unmasked head sculpt as it is on the masked one. It's especially exacerbated by the fact that the web lines don't line up. If only they'd added a web line around the base of the neck piece rather than the suit, I reckon the seam would have been completely invisible. Now, to switch out the head sculpts, it's quite straightforward. You can see it's this little clip piece. Then you bring in the masked head sculpt and you plug it down and in position. These web lines do match up a little bit better, the masked head sculpt compared to the unmasked one. I always get it wrong with the symbols, so please, you'll know better than I do, weigh in the comments section below. Are these symbols more accurate to No Way Home, or the original trilogy, Spider-Man 1, 2, or 3? Given that there are also differences between the logos in the various films that I'm just completely unaware of. The spider symbols do look reminiscent enough to Tobey's suit that I'm willing to say they are on point. This one is raised on top of the blue surface. It's also done in this bright red so it contrasts well. And then the blue fabric itself is made of this almost shiny metallic rubberized stuff with the brick pattern baked into the surface. I do have thoughts on this fabric and we'll get there in just a minute. Whereas the red material, that also has the brick pattern, but it's just printed over the top of some stretchy spandex. And then the web lines, they're adhered over the top of that. They are raised, so when you rub your finger over the top of them, you can feel them sitting proud of the surface. We do quickly have to discuss proportions. I think he's big enough. I know that some people want him to be bigger. He's got the biceps, he's got the traps, defined round shoulders, you can make out the pecs, and then the muscle shading on the red parts, yes, this is actual painted shading, it helps sell the bulkiness. I don't think he's too small at all. Some people will mod him, some people will do the body swaps, and I understand you want him to be bigger. I don't think it's necessary personally. Now, you do still have that red stretchy spandex everywhere all over the front, a little bit less of that rubberized blue fabric until we get down to the legs, where there is so freaking much of it. It's restrictive, there isn't any shading, and it's way too shiny for me. I always thought this was also supposed to be stretchy spandex. So the boots are fused to the suit itself. That means they're not adjustable, and there's no ugly bits sticking out over the top. It's completely smooth all the way down. The same thing for the ankles. Finally, they have fixed the ugly bunching at Spidey's ankles. It's completely seamless, there's no bunching of fabric, and there's no fabric tucking into the joint itself, yet you still retain full range of motion and toe articulation. Now, one thing that I do want to make mention of is the seam between the suit and the hand isn't flawless. You can see that there's this straight cut across with one of the web lines on it, and you can make out the wrist peg. Plus, the color match between the suit and the hand isn't quite right. I'm not sure if you all remember this or even know this because maybe you weren't collecting back in the day, but with the original Sam Raimi Spidey from Spider-Man 3 by Hot Toys, the way they attached the webs to him was just terrible. They had these little metal rings that you would pop around the wrist peg, they'd slide around, the webs wouldn't sit straight, and they would break all the time, so they gave you spares. But nowhere near enough spares. This way of attaching the web to him by switching out the palm, you can't even really see the gap there, then plugging the web into this spooled up piece, it is so much better. But still not perfect, because if you want the web to be going straight but have his hand angled forward, you can't do that unfortunately. The web also gets angled down. Not the end of the world, I still think it's significantly better than how they did it the first time. For a quick side-by-side comparison, This shot just puts everything into perspective for me. The new one isn't perfect, far from it in fact, he has his issues. He is a darn sight better than the original Spider-Man 3 Tobey. I still like that one. He's got this old school charm about him. He's got this chunky body. He can't stand without buckling at the knees. That's why he's in this weird stance. But the outfit is full fabric, which means you can go crazy with the posing. Everything else, I have to give to the new one. The accuracy of the colors with the muscle shading, the darker blue, the big chunky spider logo up front done in gunmetal, and even the shape and size of the head sculpt. The original one was so much narrower, and it still had the seams in the exact same places. So it's not like that's something that's worse with No Way Home. It's a touch more visible because of the darker red. Still, I just think the new one looks so much better. The black suit from Spider-Man 3 did come out a lot later than the red and blue one. That just meant that they could learn what went wrong from that original release and make some tweaks and changes. Number one, his body is better. He can actually stand if you get the angle of the ankles just right, so it's not perfect. He's now more proportionate, and they fixed the baggy neck issue by going with a separate head sculpt. Then they tweaked the lenses a little. Now, there is a new version of this guy coming out, and I'm pretty excited, honestly, to get that. If you have this one, I don't think this is a bad pairing. I like that there's a contrast between these two bodies. Having the black suit be bigger and chunkier, that makes sense to me. Next up, the No Way Home version of Green Goblin. As we all know, it's the Raimi trilogy version. This was just Hot Toys' way of sneakily giving us that original Spider-Man 1 look while not having to shell out for the Spider-Man 1 license. I ain't mad at that. I would much rather have this look for Goblin than not, seeing as though paired up next to Tobey, this looks absolutely incredible. I remember back in the day when I was first getting into Hot Toys, I would Google online trying to find out if they made a Green Goblin or a Spidey, and they hadn't made a ton of Raimi characters because those movies came out way before Hot Toys was established. Now it's come full circle, and we finally do have both of these guys in 1/6 scale. Doing all these comparisons almost makes me want to pick up another Tobey, one to have with the No Way Home figures, and one to have with the Raimi figures, because thanks to third-party companies, we do have a bunch more villains now. This isn't one of them, this is the Hot Toys new Goblin. He struggles to stand, hence the buckling at the knees. Everything else, detail-wise, even head sculpt-wise, without the mask on, very impressive release. I think he still holds up, and these two, they do work well together. Oh, Thunder Toys, you've had a good run in my display. This has been my go-to Tobey. And it's still great. He might have a spot somewhere else in the collection. His spider logo is different, the blue is lighter, he's got the shading for the musculature, and the lenses, shape-wise and position-wise, do look more accurate to me. If only the Hot Toys one was slightly taller like Thunder Toys, because they, for some reason, decided to underscale Tobey. See what I mean? Tobey should be taller ever so slightly than Tom in his integrated suit. Tom Holland is 5'7", whereas Tobey is 5'7 3/4, so let's call it 5'8" in costume. This scaling doesn't look quite right. This I can live with. Andrew being the taller of the two, in real life he is the tallest of the three Spideys, and being lankier, almost string bean-esque, there is now a distinct difference between all three different Spider-Men. Tobey unfortunately ended up being the shortest, where it should in reality be Tom. Tom has the most bling on his suit, whereas Andrew, he's the tallest and the lankiest. Time to bust out the big boys, I think. Literally, here we have Topher Grace's Venom by Thunder Toys from Spider-Man 3. Seeing these two standing together, massive nostalgia hit. And of course, Venom is significantly taller than Spidey. How about even bigger? Here we have Doc Ock, technically from No Way Home. I still think he works and gives me Spider-Man 2 vibes alongside Tobey, even though his glasses aren't accurate and he wasn't wearing the turtleneck in that film. Who would have thought that pairing up a third-party SL custom Sandman with the diorama-style display base that comes with Tobey works somehow? Yes, the color of the sand pieces on the figure is different to the display base, and now he has two heads because there's one on the base and one on the figure. I don't care about any of that. Somehow, some way, I'm going to find the space for this. It looks too sick not to display. Believe it or not, this is Hot Toys' second attempt at a Sandman diorama display base. On the left, that one came with a swap-out hand attachment and some arm articulation, so you can have the mace or a hand, with the black suit Spidey from Spider-Man 3. The detail there was good, but nowhere near as good as the new one. Adding the real sand onto the surface, I hate the idea of it. You can't deny it just looks so much more realistic. Going over articulation, starting off with Spidey's head sculpt. Even though it's on a separate neck, there isn't a joint in there, so you don't get any motion from the base of it. Only up underneath the head sculpt with a double ball peg. Looking forward to there, looking up to there, maybe enough for a decent web swinging pose, swivel, and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there on clicky ratchets, going forward and back, butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down, swivel at the bicep, double bend at the elbow going past 90, and then for the wrist peg, it's a hinge and swivel. His torso crunches forward on two separate ratchet joints to there, going back to there, swivel, and pivot side to side. His legs go forward to there, also on ratchets, going out to there, nice and clicky, swivel at the upper thigh, double bend at the knee going just past 90, and then for the ankles, a hinge and swivel, which is a very strange choice. I was hoping for a double ball peg, that's just the best way of doing things, I reckon, because this is a touch more limiting. You do get forward and back plus swivel, but if you want ankle tilt, you have to rotate the joint inside the boot and then you'll be able to move it side to side. They have, however, given us toe articulation. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. I do want to preface this first one by saying that I still like this head sculpt, but there's so much wrong with it. So the first annoying thing is the masked head sculpt. To try and eliminate the separate head issue, which was never actually an issue, and to give us a skin-tone neck with the unmasked head sculpt, they've introduced so many seams. We have one here at the base of the neck they could have easily put a web line on to try and disguise it. We have another one underneath the chin, and a massive one on top of the forehead, which, for me, is the most egregious. And then the mask itself just isn't accurate. The point where the web lines are supposed to meet is meant to be a lot higher between the points of the eyes, and the lenses themselves aren't the right shape, they're too far apart, and they're way too angled. The second annoying thing is, while the Sandman diorama display base looks impressive and it's functional, you can move the head and the pieces of rubble and add the Doc Ock tentacle, it's shedding sand everywhere. It's all over my hands, it's all over my review space, and when I put this in the cabinet, it's going to be all over my display. I personally prefer the paint app that's been applied to the surface of a base to actually stay on said base, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there. And I would have liked to have seen the standard base included as well. If you're getting the deluxe version, you should be getting everything. The third annoying thing is, whenever I look at Tobey's suit on screen, the blue sections never read as though they're made of this shiny, metallic, rubberized material. Making it out of this stuff, number one, I don't think is accurate. I'm 99% sure it's supposed to be matte, stretchy spandex, and it's way more fragile this way. If you leave his arms or legs bent for a long period of time, then you bend them right back down, the creases might be permanent, or it could have stuck to itself, causing a whole bunch of other issues. The first cool thing is look at those ankles. Finally, they figured out how to ditch the bunching and the fact that the fabric would normally tuck into the joint. This looks so much better. The second cool thing is we finally have skin tone necks for Spidey figures. I don't quite love the way they went about executing it, with the seam at the bottom without the web line over the top to disguise it, rather than just using a piece of rubber over the top of the suit so that there wouldn't have been a seam there. Still, I like that they're experimenting, and whenever Spidey does take off his mask, his neck is exposed. It's not like the suit just continues up under the head sculpt, so the effect, from a distance, I think does work. The third cool thing is they did the shading on the red sections. I was worried they weren't going to do this, they were just going to rely on the body poking through the fabric. I'm glad they didn't. The shading is supposed to be there, and it looks so freaking good. Wrapping up on the Spider-Man No Way Home, Tobey Maguire / Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man. This guy is far from perfect. The display base is shedding sand everywhere, which has me very frustrated, having to clean the review space constantly. The suit with the rubbery blue material means that you can't necessarily keep him in a dynamic pose. Hate that for Spider-Man, especially when the original suit was stretchy spandex, so what the hell, Hot Toys? The lenses on the mask aren't right, there's seams everywhere, and he's a touch too skinny for some people. Not for me, though, I'm okay with the body choice. I still love this figure though, flaws and all, like I said earlier, and I hate to repeat myself, it's just that this is their best 1/6 scale attempt at a Tobey to date. That's not to say that they won't improve in the future, there is 100% room to do so. I literally just went through all of the cons and all of the things I would have liked to have seen changed on this guy. I don't think he's worth skipping. If you are collecting the No Way Home line, in hand, he's got presence. There's the nostalgia factor. And it is a high quality release. All of the muscle shading and the raised web lines and the detail and the proportions, and having that huge Sandman diorama style display base. This guy is going to stand out for all the right reasons. Those small little niggles that I've already complained about, I don't think are deal breakers. At least not for me personally. Overall, I'm one happy Spidey collector. Now, I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research, make sure you're comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site in the description below, along with the discount code Justin's Collection, for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.